Today's episode is sponsored by PINpoint. Visit them at pinpointinfo.com.
Aerospace and defense manufacturing.
Machines and automation.
Additive manufacturing.
Smart manufacturing.
Global manufacturing economy.
Welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals, powered by SME. From the design screen to the shop floor to final assembly, we drive the conversation about making manufacturing smarter by connecting people who are passionate about manufacturing.
Hello, and welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, the podcast for manufacturing professionals. Make sure to like and subscribe to get new episodes delivered to your feed each week. I'm Amy Bryson, contributing lead editor of Manufacturing Engineering and Technology magazine. Today, we'll be talking about ways to drive manufacturing performance. And I'm joined by Rob MacMillan, chairman and founder of PINpoint Information Systems. And Rob is an entrepreneurial-minded leader. He has more than 3 decades of experience in both establishing and growing business in the manufacturing sector. He has a degree in mathematics, and he's passionate about the creative process of development, marketing, and sales of PINpoint's MES platform, helping companies achieve manufacturing excellence through strategic implementation. So Rob is a great person to have for this topic. Thank you for joining us, Rob, and welcome to the show.
Amy, thank you for having me. I'm excited to delve into this big subject. Just as a means of introduction, again, my name is Rob MacMillan. I have been working in the manufacturing space my entire career. I sort of landed here by a complete accident. Just happened to bump into the right recruiter at the right time. I found myself working with automakers, and I just got intrigued by the whole subject of manufacturing, and I've been working within that discipline ever since.
That's really cool. And I hear that more and more, that people kind of, happenstance into their career paths, and it's very serendipitous. But I'm really interested if you can share a little bit more with our listeners about, the origin story of PINpoint. What inspired you to start a software company focused on specifically driving manufacturing performance?
Yeah, sure. PINpoint grew out of another company that I owned. I was in the business of providing assembly equipment to automakers and other tier 1 manufacturing companies. And, the promise of this equipment was better performance. And I learned early on that equipment alone just could not get the job done. That it required something else. And I had this idea that software was really that coordinator that was required to actually deliver on some of the promises of the sophisticated equipment we were selling. So, and that really came to fruition through the automotive outsourcing trend of the 1990s. GM, Ford, and Chrysler were still the big three. They started to outsource the assembly of major components like instrument panels and seats to lower cost, non-unionized companies. And all of a sudden, facilities started popping up in cornfields around North America. And companies that were largely in the logistics business, trucking companies and other things, all of a sudden were tasked with trying to build 60 sophisticated modules an hour, ship them in reverse order, deliver them just in time to a final assembly plant so that they could be unloaded at exactly the same time that a vehicle was coming down the line. So, and remember, this is in the technological context of the 1990s. So we didn't have a lot of the things that we take for granted today. So that was a very tall order, and this was also kind of the ultimate high stakes game. These manufacturers had to perform, or they paid significant penalties. So, the old adage that necessity is the mother of invention. I think that's true when you look back at the development of the tier 1 assembly industry, because technology simply did not exist, and these companies needed to find a way to be more efficient, to drive higher quality. And I was, really fortunate to be exposed to this and kind of in on the ground floor, because these companies and PINpoint has been participating in this process ever since to help these companies flourish in this sort of high stakes, cutthroat environment. So we learned a tremendous amount through in the early days working with these companies and helping them survive. But we learned, a couple of things that I think are worth sharing with the audience. This is when we became passionate about quality and efficiency. And it seems almost ridiculous to state that that's the common currency of manufacturing, because what else would manufacturers care about? But this is really where companies had to perform or they perished. And I wish more companies had that mentality today. It isn't as common as you would like. But probably the most enduring lesson we learned was that what these companies really needed to survive and flourish in this environment was exactly what PINpoint needed to be able to scale our business and grow. And that was an out-of-the-box product that was capable of managing this chaotic environment of the plant floor in discrete assembly plants. But provide this in a way that was user-friendly enough that the average person in a facility like this could use it in a way sort of similar to Microsoft Office, that would allow people across all disciplines of a manufacturing operation to modernize how they approach their daily responsibilities. And while we couldn't really pull it off at the time, we had to wait for technology to align and a few other things to come to fruition. But that was something that we identified early on, and that's really what defines PINpoint today, is that we are the company that started this movement. And we have the most mature, most comprehensive, most feature-rich, out-of-the-box product that can be deployed in a wide variety of manufacturing environments to deliver higher levels of quality and efficiency.
Thank you for sharing that. It's such a cool story, and I love that you liken it to Microsoft Office. Reducing complexity, something that is user-friendly, that just becomes a part of how you live your daily life, and in this case, how you work. So that segues me into my next question, which is really around this whole notion of digital transformation. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time, and we are still talking about it because it's hard. And so many manufacturers fail to realize its true potential, even when they have the best intentions and sometimes, really comprehensive plans. And since you have a unique background and a unique vantage point at PINpoint, working closely with a host of global manufacturers, I'd love to hear from your perspective about some of the biggest headwinds and challenges you see holding manufacturers back from achieving real digital transformation.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a that's a big
You can break that apart.
yeah, no, that's a big subject and probably one of my greatest passions, to be honest. And I'm passionate about it because it's holding so many companies back from being more successful, and that I think there is some sort of common sense language that can be brought to this that might help people. I really believe that the primary issue is the lack of credible thought leadership.
What exactly do you mean by that, Rob?
Well, let me try to explain. I think it really, when I say lack of credible thought leadership, the way it manifests itself in a lack of a methodical plan that is capable of driving sustainable change. Headlines like digital transformation and Industry 4.0, they provide the hype, but they don't provide the substance. And, you've already mentioned driving manufacturing excellence. It's really hard. And slogans just don't get it done. And I just find that way too many companies come to this conclusion that digital transformation is somehow all about buying shiny objects or technology that comes with a promise that it'll solve all their problems. And this mentality leads to disappointment every single time. So, and promising sound bites tempt a lot of manufacturers into putting the cart before the horse, so to speak, because it's easier to write a check and buy something sexy, than it is to do the heavy lifting necessary to fully understand what's holding you back operationally, and then make some thoughtful selections of technology selections that come with a reasonable expectation that they could contribute to the behavior necessary to actually drive improvement. And unfortunately, the good old thoughtful process engineering necessary to build a credible plan is not seen today as sexy and progressive, and maybe not even in line with slogans like digital transformation. But it always provides the foundation necessary to support a credible plan to path to improvement. And by far the most common issue is that companies don't have the resolve to dig into this fundamental element of understanding and being honest about what they do and don't do well, documenting it, and then just building a credible plan to drive some real change.
And how is it that you work with customers, potential customers, to help that process, the documentation, the really truly understanding what's working, what's not working, what to do more of, what to do less of?
Sure. I mean, we have a methodology for doing this. You've got to start somewhere, and you've got to take some baby steps. So we typically help them create a path to some incremental transformation, maybe starting with something as simple as just digitizing work instructions, and get stepping off the curb, but doing so with the accepting that they need a path towards a more sophisticated solution. So you don't want to be boxed in technologically by selecting a work instruction platform that can't support the next step, which is because ultimately work instructions are just a suggestion. We need to be able to move into methodical process control so that we can drive a repeatable result that will then create the data necessary to start to provide us with the sort of metrics-based evidence to start to drive change. And until we get to the point where we have that data in our hands to prove to our customers why they need to change, that can be a very difficult step to take.
Great. I want to dive a little bit deeper into that piece, but before that, it seems like you work, your work with various manufacturers is really of interest to our listeners who represent many manufacturing sectors. I'm wondering if you're seeing, best practices or commonalities from industry to industry that, our listeners can learn from, or what do you see there in terms of those commonalities?
I think most of the credible standards and benchmark in industry have their roots in automotive. They are the most successful adopters of technology. It's made somewhat easier by their nice linear conveyor-driven environments and that sort of thing, but they have led the way in making technology work for them. They were doing things 30 years ago that many companies are attempting to do today. They also made disciplines like Lean and the Toyota Production System popular, and they have proven that this kind of discipline can drive results. So I think it's prudent to look at the system that automotive uses, to their management systems, how they leverage technology in their environments, and then invest the time and energy necessary to determine how that relates to your environment, how that could be relevant to you. But also being careful of one thing, because lots of companies that I meet try to convince themselves that their environment is special or they have challenges that nobody else understands. And I honestly think this is an excuse for not studying what they do well and what they don't do well within their environment, and looking for solutions that other people are using successfully to solve those issues.
So that's really good insight. Thank you for that. And let's jump back into what it does take to make digital transformation successful. You just pointed out that it's not just about the technology. It's about the process, the people managing the process and getting on board to change, essentially. With so many manufacturers maybe launching initiatives and maybe stop and start. What's really required to turn efforts and investments into these measurable gains, not just in quality and performance, but just in terms of, becoming much more competitive in this extremely volatile marketplace?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And again, one that I could bore your audience probably for hours on. But the short answer is culture. Digital transformation, in my opinion, is not about technology. It's about changing culture. And I would point to, Toyota in the early days when they were building vehicles in Japan. They had a very structured and regimented culture and gained the reputation of producing the highest quality vehicles in the world. And they used paint marking, paint daubers like you would use in a bingo hall to track certain things. So I think that's an example of how strong culture can lead to incredible results. Now, we have a different culture here in North America. So what we want to try to figure out is the right mix of technology that can support that sort of culture. And if we can do that, you're absolutely on the right path. Culture and discipline gives us the ability to create a robust data set. Chaotic data sets don't provide much value, but data sets that are the byproduct of repeatable process and good plant floor discipline will give us the foundation we need to take action. And when on this whole subject of data, I think it's becoming tired for a lot of people because every company has data, but in my experience, most are information poor. And again, sort of like the technology perspective, a lot of companies want to jump to the finish line and not properly consider what data they really need and how to get it. And because this requires that same methodical mentality that we've already discussed around other aspects of the transformation journey. And again, it starts with studying your process and learning what those opportunities for improvement could look like. So, so that you can purchase technology that's thoughtfully selected with a expectation that it's really going to impact performance. And only then can you really hope to have the data necessary to fully understand what's happening on the shop floor. And that's what can provide us with the necessary evidence to develop the resolve to change the culture in a way that can lead to better results. And in short, there's just no shortcuts. As much as everybody wants to find the silver bullet, I really believe it is this methodical pursuit of culture change that ultimately leads to success.
Yeah, I think that's also a piece you mentioned at the top of our discussion, just the complexity in people. Maybe they understand they have a ton of data, but they just don't know where to start to understand which is the most important, where to connect systems, what to do with the data. They may have a perception about what's functioning or what's working well or areas to improve, but that might not be supported by the data. So people may have data fatigue in terms of talking about it, but I think that as it relates to understanding it and being guided expertly down this path versus a one and done, as you mentioned, it's more of a marathon and not a flip of the switch. I'm interested in your perspective on, once you're on this digital transformation path, how do you take it to the next level? How do you connect all those dots and really start to feel good about your investments and the time and the commitment to changing the culture?
Another great question. I really think it starts with the culmination of some of the things we've already talked about. For lack of better words, the non-sexy side of digital transformation, putting those foundations in place, understanding what's happening. But by following a methodical path and driving some measurable improvement, you're in essence building the business case for going further. And, again, when you try to jump to the finish line and you're trying to fund a multi-million-dollar investment without first establishing the core belief that this can have an impact, I think that's a pretty tall order. So by following these methodical steps and being able to actually leverage data, change the culture, quantify some gains, then you have exactly what you need to take that next step. And I think finding a partner at that point that speaks your language, I believe it always has to be rooted in common sense, because way too many consultants are in the business of promoting headlines, and I think that just creates more noise and makes that path to improvement even harder to navigate. But if you can find a partner that has new and can provide some of that thought leadership, I think that's ultimately the best path forward. I think when I look at PINpoint and what we've been attempting to do over the last several years, we have a very tangible and sort of common sense methodology for trying to do that. And maybe to try to just illustrate that, I could talk for a second about a couple of common traps that most manufacturers fall into. And I think it's a systemic and an industry wide sort of breakdown of logic that prevents companies to get to that next level. And something as simple, if you have a manufacturing operation that has a 10-minute tack time, product's supposed to come into a station, some value added work is supposed to be completed, and it's supposed to leave within a 10-minute window. And if it takes 12 minutes, the common belief is that you have a 2-minute problem. And, the vast majority of companies are treading water, trying to dissect that 2-minute, there's this perceived lack of efficiency of 2 minutes. But we've studied this in depth with our customers, and we've learned that to really understand plant floor operations in a way that will allow you to sort of break free and get to that next level, tack time cannot be a black box. You've got to tear the top off this 10-minute black box and look down inside. And the common way to try to do that has always been manual time studies and deploying a bunch of engineers to the line with stopwatches and clipboards is not terribly practical. So, in an effort to try to make this to get to a point in a way that our customers can coexist with it, we've developed this proprietary timing model that accounts for every second of scheduled production time, and it allocates it in 5 categories, and only one of them is value added. There's 4 non-value added buckets, and this is really proven to be revolutionary because it brings everything that we've talked about this morning into actionable insights. And this, for us, that has been the driving force that's really allowed us to help accelerate the actions our customers are taking to improve performance.
That sounds like a real light bulb moment for a lot of people, right?
It is, because again, we describe it in so many ways, but there's only a few things that matter in manufacturing. And again, I've been trying to make the case that we tend to oversimplify it and look for shortcuts, but the common currencies are quality and efficiency, and the other one is time. And so as we pursue better performance, having a clear understanding of exactly where time is going and where it's actually going, not where you think it's going, and having visibility of that in real time is the game changer that most companies need to develop a belief system that they can really get it to another level.
Yeah, and I think once you start to see those milestones and successes, they kind of build upon each other and maybe even work to create that different type of culture that you were speaking about.
100%, because I don't believe culture can be dictated. I think we've tried that. It needs to be learned, and it's really just a belief system. And I think you develop that belief system one baby step at a time in the way that you just described.
Well, that's fascinating. I mean, we could talk about this all day, and I would love to have you back and talk more about this. And I'd love to hear from you too about what you're looking forward to in the months ahead. I mean, are there any new things or initiatives going on with PINpoint?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're never standing still. I know we don't have camera on, but I've been at this for 28 years. I keep I'm just as excited about this industry today as I was 28 years ago, because it really, the whole subject of MES and the pursuit of higher levels of quality and efficiency, for many reasons, globalization and lots of other things, it's become a very mainstream subject. But unfortunately, MES is not all that well defined. I think you've probably heard other people say this. You could have 5 people around a table and you ask them what MES means, and they all say something different. So we've always had a very clear idea of what we believe the manufacturing landscape should look like. The role of ERP, the role of PLM, the role of MES, and we've just released our first version of a new platform, our V6 platform, which is really the culmination of 28 years of industry experience, and really sets us up to deliver on this vision that we've had for a fully integrated manufacturing landscape. And we're just super excited about the potential of taking that to market and spreading that message.
Wonderful. Well, that's very exciting. Congratulations on that. And what else, you talked about, talking to 5 different people to get 5 different responses about what is MES and what it does. What do you think it's important for people to know about MES?
I think at the end of the day, it's a common sense subject. And, I've tried to make the case, don't be lured by sexy technologies. If the story's too good to be true, it probably is. On our website, we have a series of blogs where we attempt to demystify some of the subjects around MES and provide some common sense building blocks and justifications for how you can move forward in a way that doesn't have to cost a lot of money and that we feel can lead to real tangible results. So be methodical, be focused, and really try to expend your energies impacting the things that can actually lead to higher levels of performance.
Yeah, that's great. And if people want to learn more, check out that blog. Where should they go? What is the website?
It's PinpointInfo.com. And I think you'll find there's not only a pretty big selection of blogs, but there's also a series of videos and things that are, because I think that there's been some real disservice done in the MES industry by turning it into something that's so technical and that you need to be an IT professional to be able to comprehend. That's simply not the case. The whole motivation behind our out-of-the-box product is to put the power of the MES system into the hands of the people that need it. And in order to do that, it needs to be sensible. It needs to be approachable. It needs to be something that the average manufacturing person can understand and be able to get value from. So we've really tried. We're really focused on trying to demystify things and bring that message to the market.
Yeah, I've spent some time on that site, and it really the information on there is delivered in a way that does cut down on some of the complexity and breaks it down into actionable, like kind of go-dos or homework assignments for people when they're interested in learning more about MES, as well as how software-based solutions can really help improve your overall operations. So Rob, is there anything else you think is important for our listeners to know?
I hope I've covered the subject the best I can. I really I just think that if you can stay focused on what the credible path to improvement is, it shouldn't be something that's hard to understand. It should be common sense, and if it's too technical that you just can't get your head around it, I think there's something wrong.
Well, Rob MacMillan, it was certainly a pleasure speaking with you, and I want to thank you for your time and speaking with me and sharing your insights with our listeners. And I also want to thank our listeners for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast feed to stay up to date about what's happening in advanced manufacturing. Also, you'll find a host of resources by visiting us at advancedmanufacturing.org. Take care, everybody.